Hello and welcome to The Great Creators, conversations about creativity with some of the most celebrated actors, musicians, and performers of our time. I'm Guy Raz, and on the show today, the great Kenan Thompson on how he stays funny and fresh in his 20th season on Saturday Night Live. If you think about great comedians over the past 25 years, pretty much all of them have had periods where they weren't producing a whole lot. So it's not a stretch to say that Kenan Thompson might be the most consistently funny performer of his generation. At 44 years old, he's already the longest-running cast member in the history of Saturday Night Live. 1,500 sketches on the show, and he's mastered dozens of celebrity impressions. And here's the thing, Kenan was actually really famous way before SNL. He was the star of the Nickelodeon sketch comedy show All That. They made a spin-off show called Kenan and Kel, and a movie, Good Burger, which has this incredibly enduring appeal. Just ask my children, even though it was made 25 years ago. In today's episode, you'll hear Kenan reflect on how he moves past failure and how he bounces back after a sketch falls flat. You'll hear what it means to find a creative sandbox and what that can do for you. We'll also hear about the mentors like Tracy Morgan and Tina Fey, who helped Kenan become a writer, not just a performer. And also, I ask a hypothetical question about Kenan's future at SNL. You won't want to miss his answer. Here's what you need to know for now. Kenan grew up in Atlanta. He was the middle child of 3. His mom was a nurse. His dad worked as a mechanic and sang in the church choir. And it was in church where Kenan gave his first performance. At age 5, he played Toto, the dog, in The Wiz. And even though he had no lines, he stole the show. And soon, his mom started to enroll him in acting classes, and he found himself auditioning for roles all over Atlanta. And for Kenan, this felt like being transported to another world.
You know, it was a fun thing to do, especially once I started like going to classes and, you know, learning exactly how I could be involved in that magical land inside the TV set. You know what I mean? Because I was obsessed with television from a very young age. I used to watch it a lot with my grandmother, and you know, I was just highly intrigued by what was coming out. I just didn't really understand how it worked. You know what I mean? Like, who were these people? What is happening? You know, it was so different from what was going on outside my window at that time. So it was just like a magical place. And then all of a sudden I found the directions to Candyland. You know what I mean? It was like, holy crap. Like I could be involved in this. And, you know, they were giving me the tools to kind of do so. You know what I mean? They were telling me what auditions were and how to get there and what to do when you do get there, you know? So it was a highly intriguing process before I even knew that I really like loved doing it. You know what I mean? It was just, you know, like I said, you know, something else to do to stay out of trouble or whatever. So in the beginning, my parents, you know, aren't necessarily actors or anything like that. My father was a singer. And he sang in like the church choir, and he had like a group when he was in the military or something when he was overseas. So legend has it he had bumped into Jimi Hendrix at one point or something like that. So, you know, like all those kinds of things swirling around him. But he also had, he was a man of many talents. Like he's a mechanic. You know, he, you know, raced cars at one point. He had his real estate, you know, he has his real estate license. You know, he just wore a lot of hats. So the entertainment thing wasn't necessarily like a family focus, but when we first started, my brother and I both, you know, got our headshots together, and we were just, you know, doing a lot of plays at church and school and stuff, and everything was kind of together. But we're 4 years apart, so when he went to high school, he kind of, you know, put acting aside to kind of experience his, you know, cool teenage years and stuff like that, and went off to college and, you know, wasn't as dedicated in the beginning. Like he returned to acting now, and he's been doing a lot now, and I'm very, very proud of him. He didn't, you know, lifelong dedicated like I did. And I got lucky because, you know, I started young and wound up in a kid's world where I could, you know, gain a lot of experience, you know, without a lot of high stakes, I guess. And, you know, starting it off, being from Atlanta afforded a lot of auditioning kind of opportunities for commercials. There weren't a lot of like TV shows and movies in Georgia like that yet, but there would be the occasional let's give them something to talk about or something that like
Yeah.
one of my agents wound up booking a role in and stuff like that. So I had like little inklings of inspiration, seeing people that I knew book things, me booking things, and on it kind of went until, Nickelodeon came, or actually the Mighty Ducks and then Nickelodeon. But yeah.
Nickelodeon, yeah. I want to ask you about that. But before I do, I mean, how would you describe yourself as a kid? Like, were you in your family? Were you like always making jokes, always making people laugh? Was that your persona from an early age?
No.
No.
I'm a little brother, you know what I mean? So I was, tagging along with my older cousins and my brother and just trying to keep up basically. So we all shared a sense of humor. So there's a lot more funnier cousins than I am, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. But I was just a quiet kind of observer basically. And then when I would perform, like it would seem like I have all this like life experience because I've been, watching and listening for so long. And I guess they didn't know I was paying attention like that or whatever. It's like, well, where'd you learn all of that? I heard a lot of that, early on.
Were you allowed to watch Saturday Night Live when you were a little kid?
No, I wasn't allowed to watch. I remember watching kind of from the hallway when like, my dad would like pass out for the night and it would still be like blaring, so I would get up out of bed and like, I remember like watching Hot Tub kind of from a distance, James Brown's Hot Tub, and kind of just being like, man, that guy is an incredible performer, whoever that is. And would go back to bed. But my personal relationship with SNL didn't come until like the Farley Sandler years, like when I was kind of in middle school.
One of the things, I guess, like living in Atlanta, I mean, because you weren't in LA, right? And you began this career as a middle schooler, but I think living in Atlanta was kind of an advantage because CNN was there.
Yes.
And you got this opportunity to be like a junior reporter for CNN when you were like 14. It was like a kids news program that they had?
Yeah, it was on TBS, but at the time we were like the officers were at CNN or something weird. I don't remember exactly what the crossover was because TBS definitely had its own campus. But our show that was broadcasting, I mean, I guess it's Turner's World, basically, so he can house things wherever he kind of wanted. So I remember going to CNN Center all the time, but then the show would be on TBS. So that was confusing.
And you tried out for that? And like you just went to a tryout, an open audition? Do you remember how you got that role?
Yeah, I think it was just like an open audition and I had to like, do a fake movie review and some like, fake interstitially kind of moments where it was just like, I got to tell you, I got to tell you, Angels in the Outfield is one for the ages. And, I ended up getting a part in that first movie that I critiqued was Mighty Ducks 1. You know what I mean? It seems all very kismet and, orchestrated.
You critique that movie as part of your job as like a kid reporter, and then you were cast in Mighty Ducks 2.
Exactly.
I guess as a result of that, they saw you doing that part, and what happened? I mean, did
it was a lot of,
did you get a call?
I think manifestation was, whether I knew it or not, very active in my life because I remember saying to myself, because I got to interview, Brandon Adams and J.D. Daniels from the first Mighty Ducks, and I was so amazed. Number one, I'd never seen a black guy on ice skates before. So watching Brandon skate with like no hesitation, no pads, just spraying ice. And he was like so comfortable. It looked like he was, playing basketball, like as natural as, what that looked like from, my surroundings growing up. Like it was either football or basketball or baseball, something like that. But this guy was on ice skates looking just as natural and comfortable. And it just blew my mind. And on top of that, he gets to be in movies. You know what I mean? I was like, these guys are the coolest guys ever. I would love to be that, you know what I mean? And I'm kind of just saying that in my mind. And it just so happened that they did a nationwide call again for like Ducks 2 or something like that. That's just, what they did back then, I guess. And I got to submit, my tape, and then they asked for another tape. And then they flew me out for the screen test or whatever. And then I finally booked it. So it was like a process, but just the fact that I got to get involved in the process seemed very written already kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, as a middle schooler and then a high schooler, like you you start to get after the Mighty Ducks 2 film, you start to get bigger roles, and obviously all that became this ensemble show on Nickelodeon that you became a part of. And I want to ask you about all that in a sec, but how did you? I mean, you went from like a regular teenager to or middle schooler to all of a sudden like all those kids were watching you on Nickelodeon. Like everybody watched that show. Every single kid watched Nickelodeon. They watched that show, and you were famous.
In the beginning, it wasn't necessarily like that. Like not everybody had cable, and even if they did, Nickelodeon wasn't necessarily the cool place it's known for now necessarily. You know what I mean? Like you either liked My Brother and Me or Roundhouse or even had ever heard of those shows. I had never heard of it because there was like a gap in time from when I was really like messing with Nickelodeon. Like in the beginning, for sure, like with Danger Mouse and You Can't Do That on Television and Double Dare.
Yeah.
And then I kind of fell off, you know, right around like middle school before I got on all that when I was like 14, 15. So there was like a gap where I didn't really know that they had done Roundhouse and, you know, all these other shows. So I didn't know how, you know, Nickelodeon was progressing as far as like the cool factor was. And then I kind of caught like a year before I was watching like My Brother and Me because, you know, it was two young black boys and it was an interesting show. And I just remember like always kind of flipping past and like watching it for a second and then flipping off of it or whatever. And then, yeah, they just had this like surge of young new shows that started to just make a run at the 90s, you know? It was, you know, Secret Adventures of Alex Mack and, you know, what was the movie with Rosie O'Donnell? And it was
I can't remember. I know the one you're talking about.
Harriet the Spy. Sorry,
Harriet the Spy, right. Okay, yeah.
She is going to kill me. But shout out to Michelle Trachtenberg. But yeah, it was like a new influx of like young, you know, performers, like all coming in with like, you know, a large, like a young new person with like a celebrity aspect. So it'd be like Michelle Trachtenberg and Rosie O'Donnell, you know what I mean? Or it'd be like us around Shaq or Whoopi or whoever would be around the Kids' Choice Awards and Big Help and stuff like that. So it took a while to build to that level where everybody loved the show. And like, I think we were all like in our adult years by that point and kind of off Nickelodeon. You know what I mean? I think it was like that second wave of, you know, people finding the show and loving it and building it up or whatever.
You mentioned this idea that like that show was like, I guess almost like a sandbox, right? Because you could experiment and also fail, and the stakes weren't, as you said at the time, they weren't that high. Like you could try things and learn how to be a sketch actor. So to kind of walk me through that, I mean, you get there, you're like 14.
Yeah.
You probably some of these kids had done some, I don't know, they'd been through theater programs or, you know, they had stage parents or whatever it might have been. And you were brand new to this world. How did you kind of work through figuring out how to be a comedic actor?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of just wanted to perform, you know, whatever was kind of just put in front of me. You know what I mean? Like I had watched enough of, you know, The Cosby Show or Bill Cosby himself. I'd watched that, you know, a million different times to kind of understand sense of humor, you know what I mean? And everything Eddie Murphy that I wasn't supposed to be watching, you know, your 48 hours and you're Coming to America, like, you know, quoting Coming to America from start to finish with my brother on road trips, you know, and stuff like that. So I knew what made me laugh and I knew what kind of made, you know, certain people laugh, I guess. And that's kind of where I kind of started. But all that was just, like you said, it was a sandbox to where we had to like pull out a bunch of different, you know, voices, mannerisms, like on the fly. And it was great training. I remember I put a voice on a character and like one of the directors was like, really? That's what you want to do? And I was like, oh, maybe not. You know what I mean? And then like I switched it up to something else. And then that switch started to get the laughs or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, there's the target zone, basically. You know what I mean? Like, don't be weird or distracting, but, you know, do something that does get a reaction, like, you know, a laugh or like a clap or, you know, something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I guess I didn't really understand like the category of being a comedic actor necessarily. Like we were all still just kids, and it was set up very playground-like. You know, there was a basketball court in there. You know, the guys were around my age. You know, me, Kel, and Josh, we had each other. And, you know, I guess the other age groups needed to have themselves. Like the younger girls had, you know, their little pocket. And then Lori Beth was kind of like on her own because she was like started at 18 or 17 or whatever it was. She was like, you know, the mom of the group just by default or whatever. So she always, you know, kind of hung out with the adults and stuff because she was just more mature and interested in the writing process and stuff like that. Like we were just hanging out in Orlando, you know what I mean? Just being knuckleheads. Yeah.
You were a kid. Yeah. And did you feel, I mean, there's like, you know, there's these like perceptions of, you know, kid actors on a set, and there's a lot of ambition, and there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of like who's going to go, you know, who's going to get a better role and who's going where and who's going to make it in a bigger way. Did you ever feel any of that when you were on those sets?
No, not me personally. I pay much attention to career goals. You know what I mean? I was just like having fun, and like I wanted to be good at, you know, sports, you know what I'm saying? Like more normalized kind of things that wherever you're from in the world, that's kind of like, you know, your bragging rights basically is like you're gifted of your athletic ability or something. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of all you have to brag on. Like especially growing up, you know, middle classish or whatever, you don't just have a whole lot of like fancy cars or, you know, pocket full of cash or anything like that to brag on. You either have your dancing skills, your sense of humor, your singing ability, or your athletic prowess. You know what I mean? And like those are the kind of things that, you know, I would kind of like pay attention to how good I was at those things. And like making people laugh and acting was like, oh, I just so happened to like be able to do that as well. But like it didn't overtake my life until much later in my older high school years is when we like really got serious about being a thespian and all of that.
You know, I was watching some of just old like, you know, sketches from all that, and your Bill Cosby is, I mean, even then, I mean, it's just amazing to see you as like a 15-year-old kid like pulling that off so well. And there's and Brian Robbins, I think that was Brian Robbins who was the executive producer at the time. He said basically like you kind of came onto the show almost fully formed as a comedic actor. He's basically said that like you had this easy ability to be funny and to just understand timing. Do you feel that did it come easy to you, or was it a struggle?
I think I wasn't aware of what I should be struggling on. You know what I mean? I think I knew what made me laugh, and that's kind of how I perform things, you know? So like, I wasn't too worried about the bigger picture version of things. Like if the whole sketch makes sense from A to B, like story-wise, like at all. I would just like, you look at my words and be like, all right, well, how do I want to like do this to where I can make people laugh at it? You know, like it wasn't too deep. I was kind of entertaining myself a little bit, you know, and that was kind of the way I was able to, you know, be in tights when I wasn't necessarily comfortable with my body and stuff like that, or showing it like that or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to like show my thighs, but I had to play this superhero character because I'm on a TV show, and like a TV show is an awesome opportunity. So I think escape was pretending like there's nobody there, and I'm kind of just performing for myself in the mirror or something like that. And then I would hear these reactions and be like, yeah, maybe that's canned laughter that I'm cueing in my own little studio or something. You know, like all the kind of like mind play that still to this day, it's like when I look and I see that there's an audience, it takes me a while to like look and see what their faces really look like. I kind of just see like images and shapes as opposed to like direct eye contact where I can see like, holy shit, that's a real person like staring at me right now and looking at everything that I do and have on and look like, do I have a boogie in my nose? Like all that kind of like insecurity stuff when you realize someone is staring at you. So I think it helped, you know, kind of separate. That way I wouldn't have to panic about every single little thing. I can just go, you know, fully escape in my performance, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because being I mean, you're growing up like on television in front of audiences, right? And this has happened. I mean, there's lots of actors who grew up in front of audiences, and but you're also going through that awkward middle school age.
Yeah.
Where like, yeah, I mean, because that character that you mentioned, that superhero character is like that iconic character on that show that was like the sensitive. What was his name again? It's
Super
like the
dude.
sensitive superhero, super dude. Yeah. And he also liked like stuffed animals and bunnies and things like that. And yeah, you had to wear tights.
Yeah.
And you had to like and you're a teenager and you have to put yourself out there.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily, it wouldn't have been my first choice, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, we didn't really overthink it. It was like, oh, you're going to be a Superman? Well, Christopher Reeve wears this, basically, at the time. You know, there wasn't no nuance to like, how do we make this more of a slacks look and still be a superhero? You know what I mean?
If you would have gone to those sets in the like the mid 90s and late 90s and looked at that cast, do you think that you would have thought like, I'm going to be the one? Because I mean, obviously there are a lot of super talented actors on that show and who went on to do other things, but like you are clearly the most enduring and the best known out of that, you know, that ensemble cast. Do you think that you would have thought that, you know, 25 years later that you would have been the one that had this, you know, enduring career?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think I was going to be the only one, you know what I mean? Or like the most notorious one or whatever, you know, but I definitely thought I was going to take it seriously and do it for as long as possible and try to do it at a high level for sure, you know, because it didn't take long for us to be doing it at a high level at Nickelodeon. So I was like, well, if I surround myself with people that I love and, you know, people that I respect talent wise and stuff like that, and we work well together, like, there's no limit. Like, all we got to do is get to Hollywood and we'll show them. You know what I mean? We're going to show them as soon as we get there. And that was kind of my mentality. I pretty much thought the whole cast was going to just go into a life of performing, basically.
What was it about Kel Mitchell that, I mean, that clearly, like, there was a chemistry with the two of you, and it must have started off camera because a show was developed around the two of you on Nickelodeon, Kenan and Kel, and the two of you would go on to collaborate in all these films. What was it about him that kind of allowed you to be your best self on screen? I
guess he's like the opposite charge, you know what I mean, of a battery, basically. Like, if I'm the negative charge, then he'd be the positive charge and vice versa. You know, it's just, we do different. And when we do it together, it's like the perfect presentation of, you know, if I'm doing verbiage comedy well, he'll be doing physical comedy well. You know what I mean? If he's doing accents and impressions well, then I'll be doing, you know, more straight man kind of work well. And it just kind of, I don't know, yin and yangs itself around it. On top of the fact that, you know, he makes me laugh kind of at any given moment harder than, you know, a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, probably one of my top 3 favorite, just natural, funny people to be around. And we're very similar, and we just, you know, hit it off like day one, but it took up until rehearsal time before we really were able to be comfortable around each other. Cause in the beginning I was kind of shy or whatever. And I was like the last person cast, and they had all met each other, but I hadn't met anybody. I was meeting everybody for the first time that morning, and we all had like school. So it was like some hours where everybody was kind of doing their work and I was quiet doing my work. So they might have thought that I was stuck up or something. But when we got to rehearsal and Kel and I rehearsed, you know, those characters, Mavis and Clavis, and it just kind of gave us a chance to, you know, ad lib and showcase kind of through ad-libbing what kind of upbringing we'd had or surroundings we had growing up, or the kind of like, you know, elders that were around us that we were imitating. It became like very clear to both of us that we were kind of, you know, very, very similar cats. You know what I'm saying? And like, we should just naturally get along like that. So it was just a, you know, a natural fit, you know, as soon as we heard each other's kind of sense of humor, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy because I've got 2 boys, 13 and 11, and already maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they just found the Good Burger, right? That film. And it's become like a cult classic film for kids. Like
Yeah.
it's still enduring. Like they still watch that film. They know it.
Yeah.
And I remember like the first time they watched it, maybe 4 years ago, they've seen it maybe, I don't know, 40 times.
That's fantastic.
Just laughing and laughing and just there's something about what you do, what the two of you do in that film and on screen that just connects with kids, you know, because an adult can watch that film and be like, oh, this isn't that funny, or maybe this, you know, you might watch it and be like, oh, this is stupid.
Right.
But there is something about like the writing and then the acting in that film, like it's almost like everybody involved in that is communicating right to kids. They understand what is going to make them laugh.
Yeah. I mean, I think the guys that wrote it had a lot of experience in it, you know, like we'd been doing that sketch for 4 years already at that point, you know. It was like one of his first characters that he ever did, so it was comfortable shoes for him. That's why that table read recently was insanely funny, because he just hopped right back into that joke pattern and that character, and it was almost like he could do it, you know, it is like he can do it in his sleep, you know what I mean? Like it's so natural for him. And it's just such a pleasure to watch. And it's a great character for that kind of comedic kind of pattern. You know what I mean? Like someone says something that should be pretty normal, and then he'll say something completely insane and like way off topic. And it's just, that's his process. You know, that's how Ed goes through the world and see things through his lens. And then, you know, I was blessed that they put me in it, you know what I mean? Because I was always like different characters when we were on the show. So they didn't really know what to do with me for 2 hours. They were like, I don't know if you want to be the construction worker for 2 hours, or if you want to be, you know, some other character that, you know, we just make up or whatever. And then, you know, luckily they just landed on me kind of just being a normal kid or whatever, like getting into hijinks. You know, kind of like a mixture of all that and Kenan and Kel. You know what I mean? So that was lucky for me. And that also kind of started the whole like balance of like one of us can be crazy and the other one can be, you know, pretty serious or whatever. And we had already experienced that with Kenan and Kel. So some episodes I'd be going crazy and he'd kind of be trying to steer me like the right way or whatever in a calm kind of, you know, manner or whatever, like straight man manner. And then, you know, most of the time he'd be doing something crazy and I'd be trying to calm him down. So I think we had practice in that dynamic. And, you know, I think it came forward in Good Burger because, my characters are mostly straight man in the whole time pretty much. And I loved it.
Do you get kids coming up to you, like little kids to this day, knowing Good Burger?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Are you kind of blown away by that? Because, I mean, there were hundreds of like kid and teen movies made in the 80s and 90s, and most of them are forgotten. And that one like kind of became like the Big Lebowski for like a cult film for kids. Yeah,
I mean, luckily I'd had experience being around people that had done that in their life. Like I had met Emilio and talked to him about that once, and you know what it was like being in something at a very young age, and then you know how he felt about where he's at with it at that point, and then where does he want to go with it? You know, we had a very cool 5-ish kind of minute conversation. Like, you know, a conversation with a 15-year-old is not going to be too long. But, you know, he did drop some tidbits of, you know, I was very fortunate. You know, I have a wonderful family and they support me. And, you know, whatever I do, it has to agree with my soul and my, you know, like I can't force the ball uphill. It has to feel natural or else like it's not for me, basically. And I was like, interesting. The things that are for you will be for you, basically, you know? And I enjoyed that mentality because I had seen him in The Outsiders and Breakfast Club and, you know, on and on and went.
And then Mighty Ducks, obviously.
To be able to like actually touch him and shake his hand and like watch him rent out go-kart places for us, you know, like he rented out like Malibu Grand Prix one day just so we could all like have a night together and like play video games and, you know, race the little go-karts and stuff like that. I was like, this guy must be a gajillionaire. You know what I mean? Like I never even heard of renting out an entire anything, you know? So it was a very cool example to be around early in the game.
I want to ask you about SNL because obviously that happened a couple years later, but you got that role and you got that part. You got chosen to be on SNL in 2003, but you tried out a bunch of times, and this is normal. I mean, Jimmy Fallon tried out 2 or 3 times, and I think his audition tape is out there. It's famous. You can watch it. What was your audition like for SNL? What do you remember? I mean, you must have been. First of all, were you nervous? I mean, that's the one thing that you really wanted, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the one thing that we had been, talking up to for sure, specifically. Like, we used to compare all that to be like the SNL for kids kind of from day one when we would have to like do our first promotional kind of meetings and stuff like that. So trying to get there was, in the back of my mind, but when the opportunity actually comes, it's like, oh, snap, you know what I mean? Because I wasn't necessarily coming from the Groundlings. I wasn't coming from Second City or anything. Right. So it wasn't like I was... Or stand up like a lot. Right. I wasn't necessarily like officially trained for it. I was just trained to do television. You know what I mean? I knew I could do that. And I know I can do sketch, but I didn't have any like writing responsibility at all in my Nickelodeon years. And that's a large part of SNL is like bringing your personal sense of humor and comedic voice forward through your writing. So my audition was all over the place. You know what I mean? Like I'd never done stand up, so I didn't really know what to do. So I started with like a phone call sound effect. You know what I mean? This
is in front of Lorne Michaels and Tina Fey.
And, 40, 50 strangers in some comedy club on the Upper West Side. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just like all very shocking because I hadn't spent much time. I've been in New York maybe once, previous to that or something. So yeah, it was all, a real shock to the system, but I made it through that first like awkward 5 minutes of trying to tell some weird ass stories with Sharpton and Schwarzenegger talking to each other for some reason and like doing some Cosby.
How would you do what you did? Sharpton and Schwarzenegger talking to each other back and forth?
For some reason, like I had come up with this thing where Schwarzenegger called Sharpton to fix the water situation or some shit. Like talking about the water even back then for California. And like Sharpton was like calming him down or something because Schwarzenegger was panicking. So I there's no logic to why except for the fact that I did impressions of both of those people. Sharpton more so than Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
Can you just give me like a line of what that sounded like? I'm just so desperate to know what that sounded like.
It was like, if I can remember correctly, it was like, yeah, hello. And then Schwarzenegger, I need your help. We're having a lot of problems in California and this, that, and the other. Calm down. Who's calling? It is Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm the governor of California. I need to. Well, I'll be out there probably in a couple of weeks. I don't know. Just going back and forth, nonsensical.
It's amazing. Yeah. I think you should have done that on the show. So you didn't feel like the audition went well or the tryout went well?
I just felt like I was awkward. You know what I mean? I would because it was quiet. It wasn't like, getting laughs. You know what I'm saying? It was making me laugh, like once again, a kid kind of performing for himself in the mirror. But I could hear that it was very quiet in there because it wasn't the traditional presentation of joke telling. You know what I mean? It was just like me doing voices to myself without explaining it at all. And just kind of like, I don't know. I didn't understand that it was, a stand-up night. I thought it was an audition, so I could just be straightforward with what I do as opposed to like entertaining an audience, like for real, from scratch with joke telling. Like never. Terrifying.
I mean, you obviously got the part and joined in 2003. When you got there, here you are around like all these people you've been watching on television for a long time, but you're now like one of their colleagues, and I'm sure people welcomed you and were really, friendly. And what do you remember about being on that? In that first year, did you feel intimidated? Did you feel nervous? I mean,
I didn't feel intimidated. I only felt intimidated on writing night because everybody would like disappear, and they had offices, and I was like, shit, like I have a fucking office that I share with like 2 other adults. I'm like, what is it? Fucking prison? You know what I mean? Like, what is this like shared space shit? And a lot of people were typing and reading the news and just doing a whole lot of like stuff that I wasn't
like
a daily
your
basis
fellow actors
thing.
too, not just the writers,
No,
the
like
actors
literally
too.
everybody would just
Everybody.
disappear, you know, and like they
To
would
start writing,
come out for dinner and like joke with each other all of a sudden, and then like, you know, you're like a guy kind of looking out the window or whatever. When you turn back around, everybody's gone. You know what I mean? I'm like, holy shit! Like, where did they go? And then I learned about, you know, scheduling meetings with writers and collaborating and like being involved in really understanding the part of the contract of, you know, the 2 sketch kind of minimum or whatever, you know, having your name on a couple of things per week kind of thing. And then it became a real job at that point. You know, it wasn't just, you know, a kid performing for himself. It was like, no, it's time to like perform for the world and figure out what the world thinks is funny, or at least the adult part of America type stuff, you know?
Yeah, I mean, writing is so hard, and writing good comedy is so hard.
Yeah.
So, kind of, how did you figure it out? I mean, because you'd come from a world where you were like you were becoming those characters, and you were changing things, but you were handed a script, and now you were expected to also write scripts, and so how did you start to figure it out?
I kind of just was watching and observing and, you know, kind of being around a bunch of different kinds of writers, you know, and luckily, like all the women on the show kind of little brothered me. So like Maya and Tina and Amy and Rachel, they all kind of like made me their like little brother kind of immediately. They started calling me Kiki and little nicknames and stuff like that. And like really would start to like look out for me and, you know, laugh at, you know, and just be supportive, like laugh at the things I'm trying at the table. Like, you know, the things that were definitely earned, they would, you know, participate in the laughter of. Like, it wasn't like cheating, like they're just going to laugh at anything, but the things that did strike them funny, you know, they would genuinely laugh. And, you know, also in between times, like in the rehearsal or in the hallways or whatever, you know, they were always very embracing. And, you know, the guys were too, but really like Tracy was like, he wasn't even on the show anymore, but he was there my first day, just like holding court and telling jokes, you know what I'm saying? And he had moved on, but he was so used to, you know, that pattern. So he came through, and then he took me and Finesse out to lunch and like really like took me under his wing, you know, kind of supportive, like little lessons, tidbits here and there, you know, positive, you know, like affirmations and, you know, just keeping your mental health and like, just like a cheerleader basically. And, you know, a big brother. And I so wanted that, you know, kind of from someone in the business. Like I wanted someone to kind of like, you know, big brother me or whatever. And he took on that role. So I don't know. I felt very kind of like protected and kind of secure in the allowance of like the time it took to really figure out that learning curve of how to write, you know what I mean? Just because I felt like my performing would balance the fact that I didn't really know how to write necessarily, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I would try to wind up in anybody's thing. And that led to me like hanging out with like the T-Sean Shannons of the world and the James Andersons of the world. And, you know, Tina and Seth and, you know, those like writers, you know what I mean? And Paula Pell and, you know, people like that. And kind of just watching their process, you know, the slow watching concrete, dry process it can be, kind of going line by line, trying to figure out a sketch. But once I learned how to take that format and put it towards what I thought was naturally funny or whatever made me laugh personally, that's when it started to go a little hand in hand. But that didn't come until like season 5 or some shit with Scared Straight, basically.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things about like when you're a viewer, right, and you watch comedy and it's really good, you just watch it and you take it in and then you move on. But to write good comedy is so hard. Like I think most people don't understand how hard it is. Yeah. Because there might be like, you know, I don't know how many sketches on SNL on any given night. And some of those sketches might land and some might not. But it's so hard to write things that make people laugh. Like how I mean, how did you like? How did you figure out how to kind of sweat that out? You know, I mean,
I think,
and do you still feel that way? By the way, like, do you
absolutely.
still is it hard for you to write?
Absolutely, it's hard. You know, when you're at the so-called top of your game, or you've been there long enough to kind of know how to do it or whatever, it's still hard to come up with something new, you know, like,
yeah.
And then make sure it has legs long enough to actually be a fully fleshed out, you know, sketch or, you know, idea or whatever. It is very difficult. And how did I learn? Still to this day, it's still very much trial and error. You know what I mean? Like you put your blueprint down, and then you try to fill it in with what you think is funny, and you make adjustments as you go along, basically. So yeah, it's crazy, you know, because even when you've done a sketch and it worked and you try to do it a second time, you have to elevate it each time or whatever. So you have to figure out what that looks like, you know, and I don't know. It's hard, you know, you just try your best, and the audience will let you know if it's, you know, killing it, or if it's mediocre, or if it sucks, you know?
Right. I read, I don't know if this probably is true, that you've done more impressions on that show than anyone else. And obviously you're well known for like Steve Harvey and, well, Steve and others. And, how do you approach doing an impression? Like, you just did Al Sharpton, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, are you trying to be as true to who they are? Like,
I feel like that's Daryl. You know what I mean? Like, Daryl actually went and met Bill Clinton and sat with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For him to be able to encompass that character, he had to like go study the man in person to be like, oh, I know who you are, the person. For me, it's mostly tones. You know what I mean? Like, the impressions that come easiest to me are people that sound a specific way, you know? So like, I guess that just comes from like a musical kind of theater, or, you know, singing in a choir. Like, I can just hear those notes. Like, I can hear the guttural voice of Al Sharpton. I can hear, you know, what Whoopi sounds like, what Charles Barkley sounds like, you know, and those are the ones that I have the most fun with. What Steve Harvey sounds like, you know, it's what they sound like. And when I don't have a sound impression, then it's kind of like, all right, well, what are the circumstances surrounding this person? Like, where are they from? What kind of job? Like, if it's a senator, like, is he Republican? Is he Democrat? Where is he from? You know what I mean? What kind of things is he into? And that gives me more attitude than it does, you know, a tonal impression. But then you have people like Jay Farrell that are like insane with their like tonal gifts. You know what I'm saying? So he'll be able to like find the nuances in a Will Smith. You know what I mean? Like, he can kind of do both tones and subtleties, and that makes his impressions like really on point. You know what I'm saying? So you're like, holy shit, like, nobody does Will Smith like that. And he happened to notice these things that happen often enough that he can imitate it. And we can also receive it as things that we know of Will Smith to be doing, kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, kind of like, for me, it's mostly tones.
But by the way, you worked with Steve Harvey earlier in your career. You were on a show. What does he think about your impression of him?
We good now. He didn't love it at first. You know, he's had a life, you know what I'm saying? And he's had a kind of claw his way up out of the gutter kind of life, you know, like, he lived in his car at one point. He's had a lot of different jobs. He's, you know, anything that has nothing to do with glamour or entertainment or anything, like, just like real getting through life kind of existence, and then worked his way up to where he is now. So like, being made fun of was not appealing to him at first. Like, I don't think he saw the flattery in it necessarily, you know, but at the same time, I was a kid, you know what I mean? I was young, I was harmless or whatever. So it wasn't like he needed to attack me back. And then whenever people would bring the fact that I had done him on the show up to him, it would be with like, Steve, you got to see this because it was so good, as opposed to like, yo, Steve, you should see this because your boy is like coming at your throat. And I was like, it was never like that. It was more celebratory. Yeah.
I mean, to be impersonated on SNL is an honor, right? Like,
Right.
not everybody gets that treatment.
So it took a while, I guess, for him to see
Yeah.
it that way. But, you know, that's where we're at now. You know what I mean? Like, he sees me more so as an adult finally, as opposed to like a little chubby kid running around his heels, you know, tugging at his pant leg, like, where you going tonight, Mr. Harvey? Like, what are you doing? What are you up to? Just, you know, kind of being a mosquito in his ear or whatever, because we were so eager to learn and happy to be around these guys who, you know, we put on a pedestal because we'd seen them on TV for so long or whatever, or they had their own TV show and that's what we wanted to do and stuff like that.
There are characters that you also that are not that you developed, right? Like Darnell Hayes or DeAndre Cole. And let's talk about DeAndre Cole for a sec, the host of What's Up With That, which is just an amazing character, an amazing sketch, right? This guy has like very famous celebrities on the show,
insane.
And then he just interrupts them and stands up and sings, and it's so funny. How did you develop that character? How'd you come up with that?
God bless Brian Tucker, and shout out to Colin, you know, because Colin was like the first bridge for me to go from what really makes me laugh and being able to have that fit into the show in a way that works, you know. And he helped me kind of decode that first when we were office mates for years. You know what I mean? I would watch because he was coming from being the president of the Lampoon. So he was used to a writing obligation. And I would sit and watch him just like type, or research, or this, that, and that. I was like trying to figure out like, how are you connecting all these dots? It seemed like he was, you know, all over the place with his, you know, pattern of, you know, work, like thought process to delivery of sketch or whatever. So I'm like, how are you connecting all these dots? And I just naturally observed it when we were writing Scared Straight together. Like I came to him about, you know, Scared Straight. He'd never seen the 70s version where they were like really in their face and cursing. I was like, oh man, you got to watch it. So we watched like 2 seconds of it. And I'm like, that's kind of like what I want to do. I just want to like yell at some kids and like make people kind of sit there and take it basically without laughing, because that's great live. I knew that was great live TV. And, you know, it's always fun to kind of big Carol Burnett fan, you know what I mean? So trying to get to the break moment or whatever is, you know, super duper exciting. So I had that structure, but I didn't have anything else. And then he started, you know, thinking and processing, and it was like, all right, you're trying to teach a lesson, trying to do this. Like, what if you're constantly teaching lessons through the themes of movies? You know what I mean? And then we started like, it's like, holy shit, it's like all my like warnings basically are coming from like 80s movies. And that's when it just started to like be a perfect like marriage of an idea, you know? And that is what, you know, good sketch is, you know what I mean? Like it has a base that's grounded in some sort of reality, and that allows for, you know, as crazy a reference as you want to make. And then when we started like really getting into it, opportunities like the Teen Wolf reference sketch, like part of it was probably my favorite joke moment of that entire concept. You know what I mean? Just because it had merged into such an opportunity for such a line to happen. You know what I mean? Like I don't remember, you know, who the host was, but like the gist of this particular line is like talking, like it was a lot of it was like about like prison showers and mixing that with like 80s movies or whatever. So it was like Teen Wolf, you know, was the thing they were calling me out about. So thinking about the theme of Teen Wolf and then prison showers, like the line was like, yeah, you'll be howling all right because you just transformed from a man to a bitch. And being able to say that on television was such a highlight moment to me, because it hits home so hard for like the culture. Like that kind of talk is like, you know, just hard talk that I grew up hearing, but also it's formulated in a brilliantly like comedic reference material to be referenced in Teen Wolf. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. It just made me laugh really, really hard. So watching the beauty of that, you know what I'm saying? Like what I find funny and then being able to make it intellectual in a way was just like magic. So when we got to What's Up With That, I was like ready for that. You know what I'm saying? Like I went to Tucker and I was like, I think I got an idea where I have a talk show and I don't let nobody talk. And he was like, okay, go on. And I was like, that's kind of all I got. He was like, all right, well, let's think on it. Like, how would the theme song? It was like, yeah, I keep singing the theme song over and over and over again. He's like, all right, well, let's write that part first. And we came up with like the ooh, wee, what's up with that? And wrote that 4-bar thing out. And then he kind of like took it on himself to write like the verses or whatever. Like woke up this morning and, you know, coffee and then
had a big cup of coffee.
Yeah, get back to the chorus somehow. And then
you get things like, I mean, and Brian Tucker, obviously the writer for SNL. And then you get like Jason Sudeikis in a tracksuit like, dancing and like Fred Armisen playing Kenny G.
Yeah, those diamonds and jewels that are like tucked in there, we didn't really know were going to happen. We kind of wrote descriptions out because it was semi-funny to us to imagine Sudeikis in a tracksuit. Fred looks like Kenny G.
Yeah,
you know, like, and
playing
then
the clarinet.
Super serious celebrities, you know, and then Lindsey Buckingham, and then all the people that come in when it's circus time, like the Jake the Snake Roberts and, you know, the Jabberwockers, whatever it was, you know what I'm saying? Like,
the guy who the Chicago Cubs fan who caught that ball.
Yeah. You know, like all that, like ripe. It's ripe for, you know, any kind of playground reference that you want to throw in there, basically. So I think, but the Lindsey Buckingham element was always my favorite part of it. Number one, I had recently become a Fleetwood Mac fan. Number two, the fact that Bill never said a word used to make me laugh so hard. Cause nobody has a Lindsey Buckingham impression. We don't know what he sounds like. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I also didn't know if that look was correct or not. It was just like some grayish kind of wig and a leather jacket. I was like, yeah, sure. That's Lindsey Buckingham.
Lindsey Buckingham.
Sure. And just like, why Lindsey Buckingham as opposed to like, you know, Stevie Nicks or, you know, somebody else or whatever. It's just like already obscure. So the fact that he never talked, but he came there to have a lot to say at some point. Every single time used to just make me laugh. This is my favorite.
Kenan, you are the longest ever cast member, like the longest run performing cast member on the show ever, I think now. And just recently, Cecily Strong left the show, and you've seen lots of people come and go. Mm-hmm. By the way, what is it like when a cast member goes? Because you're working intensely close. So you had like for a long time, you know these people. There's like there's a camaraderie, right? And she left, and of course she was crying, and everybody was emotional.
Yeah.
And
I mean, for those left behind, it sucks. You know what I'm saying? Because you just miss your friends dearly. And I'm sure when Saturdays roll around and they're reminded that they're not there, it sucks for them, you know, in a way. And you have to just find a way to make your peace with, you know, the inevitability of time and rooting for, you know, people to have more opportunity or whatever and just continue the journey through life. And, you know, I'll see you again type mentality, basically. But yeah, it's very painful because you do go from spending so much time with someone to little to no time at all. You know, like I used to be around Andy every single day, and like I haven't seen him in a couple of years now at this point. You know what I'm saying? Like it like the time starts flying before you know it. You haven't seen people that you were so close to at one point for long periods of time, you know, and it's like you have to go out of your way to stay in touch as much as possible and stuff like that. But yeah, it's hard, you know, it's very emotional. And especially when people with big hearts, you know, are no longer around, like you feel that void, but also there's wonderful people that are coming in the other side of that revolving door at the same time, you know, so it's an opportunity to get to know some new people and see what that journey is going to be like.
You mentioned like when you first got there, Tracy Morgan really kind of took you under his wing and really mentored you. And now you're the guy. I mean, you're like the dean of the
dean of admissions.
The crew. Like, you're the dean of admissions. Like you're the guy. Like you're the guy that people are like, oh, you should go talk to Kenan. Like that's what probably the new people are told. Like go talk to him and, you know, just go get to, like do you feel a responsibility to also be that person to kind of
Oh, yeah.
take people under your wing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, because it's not even that it's a responsibility. It's like, it's an opportunity for me, to kind of save someone a headache if I can, you know what I mean? Or save someone the self-doubt or the roller coaster of emotions and kind of stabilize that, because the future looks so foggy when you're first starting out. There's a lot of uncertainty, and you just don't know if you're going to get the chance to show them what you really can do that will keep you around there or let you become the next Will Ferrell or, Kate McKinnon or whatever it is, and yeah, I would love to kind of sugarcoat that medicine if I can, I can't necessarily walk the plank for you. Like, everybody kind of has to have their own experience there, but my door is always open if people want to talk, and I try to remind them that this is a special place because there will be another show next week and there will be another opportunity. You know what I mean? Like, when it's getting close to the end of the season, that's a little more, it's clear whether you had a good run that year or not. So that's kind of out of my hands. But like early on and through the winter and stuff like that, it's just like, yeah, that sketch landed on his face, but that doesn't mean every single one will land on his face. So just keep taking swings, and something will stick eventually if you stay committed. Like, it might not be an idea that comes from you necessarily, but if you commit to anything that anybody puts in front of you, eventually more people will put things in front of you that will eventually work. And then people will start to understand what your sense of humor is. And it just naturally works to where the world catches up to what you think is funny if you keep presenting it and figuring out how to format it the right way, I guess.
I'm curious about your kind of long-term thoughts about what you want to do. I mean, it's 20 seasons now, and there've been occasionally you'll see something in an article say, is Kenan Thompson the heir to Lorne Michaels? I mean, Lorne Michaels is 78. I mean, he's obviously super engaged and produces a million different things in addition to overseeing SNL.
Yeah.
But I mean, is that something that you would want to do?
What if he was to like hand me the keys to SNL?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like, I get it. I think I know what it takes to get it done. Kind of like, I've seen the full 360 of it all, at this point. So like, I understand the mechanics of how that wheel turns, basically. Like, I know that machine, and I feel like I can work on it and keep it up and running, you know what I'm saying? And like, get more miles out of it and stuff like that. But at the same time, it takes a powerful person to be able to keep that budget in place. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are the times where economics comes into play kind of heavily with, things that are on television, I guess. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I don't know. Like, as long as you're able to present the same show and it looks the same, and it is able to be the same, even if you slash the budget, which is a lot of people say is not necessarily possible. But if it were to be possible, I would absolutely, helm that. Like, it would be, a dream come true kind of. Would have never thought that there would be a reins kind of handover from SNL in the first place. You know what I'm saying? So it would more so be an honor for sure.
But it sounds like something that you would love to do.
I would, as long as it was, as long as I was able to do it at that same kind of caliber and I had the same, taste buds to keep it classy and to keep it, elevated or whatever, but at the same time speaks to everyone. You know what I mean? Like, it's a coveted thing. So you don't want to like alienate people, but you also don't want to like have it be, crass or, I don't know. Like, he just has an air of sophisticatedness to him. You know what I mean? Sophistication. See, like, I'm searching for the wrong words already. So I just had to make sure like I do my job or whatever. But outside of that, like, I want to produce shit myself. You know what I mean? So yeah, I would love to be a Lorne Michaels or a Brian Robbins or a Mike Tollin or, a Steven Spielberg or any of these guys that have like built companies and sold them and built another one and sold them and all the time they're be able to be creative. You know what I mean? That's my dream for sure.
Do you think that this, I mean, do you think that this role, right, and your work at SNL is something that you can see yourself doing forever and ever? I mean, or do you think that at some point, you know, you might jump out and throw yourself into films and other things full time?
Yeah, weirdly enough, I feel like it is a thing that I could do for forever, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's more advantageous to allow the show itself to grow and change with the times or whatever, and like just have a different look. Like, I feel like once I'm done my obligation up until the 50th or whatever, it'll be a serious conversation to continue past that point, because once I got past 10, I was like, well, I guess I'll stay until, you know, Hollywood comes calling. And then I started getting close to 20. I was like, all right, well, I want to get to 20 since I'm close to 20. And now that this is the 20th season, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, as long as I don't feel like I'm in anybody's way as far as like new people is concerned or anything like that, or it's just like the new things I try at the table are still getting received in some sort of way, and not just like, oh, I've heard this a million times from you. Like, oh, what are you doing? Another black man? You know what I mean? Another old black man or another fucking like whatever. And it doesn't feel that way. Then yeah, I'll keep taking swings or whatever. But at the same time, movies do take a lot of time, and I would like to do more of them. So yeah, it's just, I feel like the time is probably coming to a close at some point. I just don't know exactly when, you know, because the stability of, you know, being in one place 8 months out of the year is also helpful when you're raising children and stuff like that, you know? So
totally, yeah.
I guess I just have to take it like in the moment, you know? But at the same time, if I could do both, I would totally.
What is something that most people watching SNL and watching what you do don't understand about the job? Like, you know, you might be walking down the street in New York City and people are like, oh, Kenan, hey, or they might do an impression of something you do. And they just look at what you do and your life and everything around it as this amazing, magical, fun thing, which of course can't always be true. I'm sure there's some elements of that are true, but what's something that people don't understand about your work and what you do?
I mean, I guess they don't understand the pain of things hitting the floor. You know what I mean? Only because I don't know if you just won't get it unless you've done that. Or like if you're the guy who likes to, you know, be the center of attention and, you know, gather everybody around for a joke, then maybe you know what it feels like when the joke doesn't land like you expected or whatever. But if you're just a normal person, I don't think you understand like how emotional that experience can be, because it does seem like it should just be so magical and you should just be happy about, you know, the limousines and the parties and the famous people and the this, the that. But it's a Monday through Saturday experience. You know what I'm saying? So like your one day off is a Sunday. So if you have any sort of family obligations or marriages or relationships or children, you know, all those things are in a juggling kind of a situation. And it's a very time consuming thing, which could apply stress and pressure to other aspects of your life. So like all that like indirect stress comes into play, but you still have to focus and get Saturday right at 11:30 at night when you've been there since noon. You know what I mean? And like a lot of people just don't really understand how time consuming it is, or emotional it can be, or stressful. Like I've heard plenty of story of my dearest friends who I thought had it all under control, having like full panic attacks and like body breakdowns and things like that. And it was like, oh, where's such and such this week? It's like, yeah, they couldn't get out of bed today. And I was like, what does that mean? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like literally couldn't move because of panic about stress or whatever, and just like hitting a wall basically with your existence. Like, do I really want to do this? Like, what am I doing? How did I get myself in this situation? Like, do I want to continue? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm hearing this from people that I would kind of look up to, you know, because I thought they were amazing, because they would be coming with brilliant ideas on a weekly basis and blah, blah, blah. So learning about not everybody is, you know, like we're all human beings, as opposed to like supposed like superheroes, what they kind of seem like at times, you know, those are kind of like little wake up calls. And it's like, all right, well, if someone I consider to be bulletproof is over there taking shots, you know, what hope is there for me? You know, like I'm vulnerable at any given moment in that case, but you just learn how to not put so much pressure on yourself or don't get so emotionally attached to each idea. You just try to do your best with it and keep it moving to the next thing, because that's kind of how the show flows. Like you do a sketch that, you know, gets a standing ovation and you're in the next sketch, you got 2 minutes to change and you're into another character. Like all that celebration is over. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to this point that like you've got to bring it at 11 at night and you've been rehearsing all day. Mm-hmm. I do. I mean, obviously not on the same level, but I do a kids show and a kids podcast, and we did a live show. We just did a live show in Los Angeles at a theater, and we recorded it. We filmed it because we're going to put it on YouTube. So we had 3 hours of filming this show.
Fantastic.
And then we had to do the show live, and I was like wiped out. Right. Yeah. And I'm thinking like you do this every single week for 20 or how many weeks a year, 40 weeks. I mean, how do you bring your energy at 11 at night or 11:30, like when you have already done a full dress rehearsal, you've been working 6 days before that, like, and then it comes down to that moment, and normally like you'd be wiped out, you'd be exhausted, but that's when you've got to bring it.
Yep.
And is it just the adrenaline that just comes to you at that moment? Like you hear them, someone over the loudspeaker going like 4 minutes till we're live, 3 minutes till we're live, and then it just happen for you?
That kind of a little bit like you feel that natural adrenaline kind of kicking in because it is showtime, but at the same time you hear people in your head, like I hear Tracy's voice like, don't peek at dress, you know what I'm saying? Don't peek at dress rehearsal, like little things like that, which are like such amazing nuggets of, you know, information to keep handy. You know what I mean? It's like, you want to perform as hard as you can for dress rehearsal because that's your chance to not get cut. But just know you're going to have to do it again. You know what I'm saying? So if you're fine with that, be fine with that. But if you're like going to blow your voice out or anything like that, you might want to be a little more cautious and not try to blow your voice out because you're going to have to do it twice. You know what I mean? And, you know, other kind of quotes would be like from Lorne. It's like, you know, we don't go up because we're ready. We go up because it's 11:30. You know what I mean? And I've been hearing him say that for years. And it's like, it's that old kind of show businessy feel of when the curtain goes up, it's showtime, no matter what time it is out in reality. You know, in here in this bubble, when they count down from 5, it could be 6 in the morning or it could be, you know, 11:30 at night. It doesn't really matter. It's showtime, basically.
What do you think is the, you know, when you hit a creative like block in your head about a character or writing or whatever it is, because so much of your work is reliant on your creative energy and your creative, you know, part of your brain. Yeah. What do you do to get yourself out of that? Because you have to basically create every single week. You have to write. You've got to think. You've got to come up with stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I lean heavily on the writers. I've never been one to front on the fact that I don't write well by myself at all. Like my sketches tend to go in 90 million directions as opposed to any sort of linear fashion. So I use those writers who've taken those creative writing workshops and things like that and those classes of how to keep storylines on track or just the way that their brilliant minds work. So I come to them and, you know, I ad-lib through the beat session, I want to call it, where we're trying to just put the outline down of whatever this concept is. And then they'll draft and I'll give notes. And that's kind of like how we go back and forth or whatever. But yeah, I love working with brilliantly minded people that are very, very smart because they can take my dumb, silly ideas. Like the dumber and sillier for me, the better, but they can present it in a way that it can be, you know, treated with respect as silly and, you know, childish or childlike they may seem, you know? So yeah, I love working with smart people, I guess.
At the end of that week, when you're just exhausted and wiped out and you've got that Sunday and you've put so much into it and probably there are moments where you're just like any job, it could be frustrating, but also you're reaching millions of people. And so what is the thing that makes you feel like it's all worth it?
I mean, I get that feeling walking past everybody's headshots every day. There's the hallway on 17th floor where every single headshot is on this one long wall, and to like walk past all that history and all those lives and all that time put into this place, that is what reminds me kind of on a daily basis that this is special. This is, almost God's work that we're doing. Like I read the letters, and the ones that aren't necessarily psychos, usually they're like, thank you because you're helping me get through hard times or whatever it is. You don't know how much laughter is needed in these times. That kind of, we're doing a service feeling, echoes pretty heavily, so
yeah,
it always just feels good to make the crew laugh even, or like my makeup person or my hair person or my wardrobe person, like, any person that I have contact with, it's nice to get a laugh from them because you never know how much they may have needed. It's like, giving somebody a hug. Can't really do that in corporate America these days, but you never know like how much they may have needed that hug in that moment. I always want to be a person that is able to provide an unexpected lifting of sorts.
Kenan, thanks so much.
No, my pleasure, man. Like, this is all my pleasure. Like, if I can give a little tidbit of insight or knowledge or whatever, I'm all about it because that's what my elders and mentors did for me. Like I'm not here because
that's awesome.
I was able to just forge a trail by myself. Like not at all.
Thank you for saying that. And thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Just huge fan. Thank you for making me laugh,
it, man.
And for my kids laugh. And
absolutely,
it's awesome.
Yeah,
I've got you're crossing all these generations.
Yeah, it's amazing
with what you do.
And tell them I'm so
That's
happy
awesome.
that they found Good Burger. I really appreciate it. Like it's amazing to me how that movie is transcending time because I remember watching movies that did that same thing. I didn't think I was going to be in one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, you when you were describing you and your brother quoting Coming to America, that's my kids and Good Burger.
Yeah, for real. Like start to finish.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I tried to show Coming to America to my kids now, they would watch 14 seconds and then leave the room.
Yeah, it is. That's the amazing Kenan Thompson. You can find out more about Kenan and find links to some of the things we talked about in this episode at thegreatcreators.com/Thompson. You can find all of our past episodes there. And please do subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any episodes of The Great Creators. You can also find the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search The Great Creators. I'm Guy Raz. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you back here soon.